Design shapes the way you live. I'm Nico, an interior design expert focused on the connection between home and well-being. Using science, design, and professional expertise, I'll help you shape a space that elevates your mindset and enhances your well-being. Let's create space for better living, starting now. Welcome back to Your Home by Design. Today's episode is about something that I think is incredibly powerful and often overlooked. We're talking about the small things, the little touches in your home that, when done intentionally, can completely change how your space feels and, more importantly, how you feel in it. This is not about full renovations. It's not about spending thousands of dollars, and it's definitely not about perfection. This is about awareness, systems, and subtle design decisions that create ease, beauty, and a sense of control in your everyday life. By the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with a clear understanding of how small changes create big emotional impact, practical room-by-room ideas that you can implement immediately, and a new lens to look at your home through, one rooted in intention, not overwhelm. We're going to move through 4 key areas of the home: the kitchen, the entryway, the living room, and the bedroom. Each one plays a different role in your daily experience, and each one has opportunities for transformation that are simple, thoughtful, and incredibly effective. So let's start in the kitchen, because the truth is that the kitchen, it isn't really just about how it looks. That's very important. But it really comes down to how it functions within your life. And this is where most people get it backwards. They more focus on the aesthetic first, when really the biggest impact comes from your systems. So I want you to think about this. Do you have a plan for your kitchen, a plan for your systems? So for instance, what time do you start making dinner every day? When do you prep? Do you need to prep in the mornings so evenings feel easier? There's not this rush when you get home from work. When do you run the dishwasher, for instance? When do you empty it? I remember this was several months ago. I decided to switch up a simple thing, the timing of when I emptied the dishwasher, because it just wasn't working for me. I was doing it in the evening, and I would find that I would be too tired to empty it later in the evening, that I would then not do it. And then in the morning, we would have dirty dishes piling up, and we didn't have an empty dishwasher ready for the dishes. So we just switched it around. We decided, let's get the dishwasher dealt with earlier in the day before we start dinner prep. And that just made it run so much smoother, and we didn't get that kind of backlog of dishes on the counter. So you can look at how your systems are doing, how they're working for you, and the timing of everything. So yeah, when do you empty it? Because here's the reality. Your days are more predictable than you think. I think we can get lost in the detail and sort of get swept up in the busyness of our days, that we forget that really we do things much more consistently than we often recognize. So for instance, you wake up around the same time. You move through your mornings in similar ways. You have rhythms about your days. And when you start to recognize those rhythms, you can design your kitchen to support them. This is where things shift, because there's nothing better than coming downstairs in the morning to a clean, organized kitchen. It really sets the tone for your entire day. It saves you time, it reduces decision fatigue, and it actually allows your attention to go elsewhere, to something more meaningful, more calming, like the light outside your window, or a small detail that you've designed or you've styled intentionally. So I think it's important to scrutinize your systems and look at the timing of when you do things. And not just that, but what habits are you wanting to instill? Are you wanting to improve your diet and be healthier? Well, how can you do that? How can you set yourself up? What's the timing that needs to happen in order for that to take place? If you want to feel just more organized when you leave the house in the morning, maybe right now you're feeling scattered. You come down in your kitchen and you've got a bunch of tasks that haven't been addressed. And then you're scrambling and then you're trying to get out the door. Whereas if you had planned for that ahead of time and now you come down to your kitchen and it's organized, it's ready to go, you've done some prep the night before. Now, I know for myself, often it's harder to kind of, when you're in that the busyness of things, to recognize that if I just set aside 10 minutes, that's all it takes the night before to do a couple of the things that will set the tone for my day in the morning. It can be challenging, but that is often all it is a very small amount of time that you can set aside to help yourself tackle those systems. So once your systems are in place, then you get to design. Once you've scrutinized what you need and what needs to happen systems wise, then you can really think about how the kitchen looks and how you need it to function properly. So one of the things you can ask is, how do I want to feel in my kitchen? Do I want to feel calm? Do I want to feel organized, taken care of? Then once you address that feeling, then you want to reverse engineer it. And this is really exciting because if you want calm mornings, you can set the coffee up the night before, empty the dishwasher before bed or earlier on in the day if that works better for you. Clear your counters so that you're reinforcing that feeling of calm. And then you want to layer in the aesthetic. Maybe your coffee station becomes something you actually really enjoy looking at. So, a beautiful tray, really cool or interesting cups, a clean and intentional setup. This matters so much more than people think because your aesthetic experience, those small visual moments, actually impact your nervous system. It's a form of self-care. Right? Reaching for a coffee cup that you absolutely love feels very different than reaching for one you don't. So setting yourself up so that you are engaging with your aesthetics in a way that's positive. So what are some design touches that will immediately elevate your kitchen? Now that your systems are supporting you or you've addressed what you need to change in those systems, and then you've asked, how do you want to feel in the space? Here are 5 simple ways to elevate your kitchen. The first one is to upgrade your lighting, especially if you have an island. This is an opportunity for a statement. When you walk into the room, it will immediately draw your eye. It also anchors the space. So you can do something really oversized, something really interesting. This becomes a focal point that immediately elevates the space. So draw your eye to that area. And this, again, you can, going back to how you want to feel in the space, if you want your kitchen to be energizing and exciting, maybe this is the hub of your home and everyone gathers here, then, think about doing something that's really engaging. So maybe it's unique. Maybe it's got a lot of movement going on. Maybe it's an interesting, glass. Maybe it's colorful. Maybe it's a fabric that's got a print to it. Just think about some sort of impact that you can bring to your island. And then number 2 is to rethink your counter stools. Introduce warmth with upholstery. I think counter stools can often be default to go with something wood or something easy even, and often people overlook how impactful interesting looking counter stools can be. So to add warmth with upholstery, leather or faux leather works well if you need something wipeable. This just softens a very hard surface space. There isn't a lot of opportunity in a kitchen to soften it. You've got I mean, everything, your floor, your cabinetry, your appliances, your countertops, everything is a hard surface. So look for opportunities to soften it. And again, back to your lighting, this is another opportunity with your lighting to soften it in that way too. But yeah, so doing like an upholstered counter stool is really, really a great way to do that. And to add interest with your counter stool too. What's the shape of it? What's the, when you pull it out and pull it in, does it go in and out with ease? Just think about the experience of it as well. And number 3, add a soft seating moment. A bench or even a small sofa in a breakfast nook changes everything. It creates a really relaxed and lingering kind of energy to the space. So just make sure that if you do add a small sofa, which I love a small sofa in a breakfast nook, I think that immediately it just draws you in. It just gives you the feeling of lingering, which I think, again, if that's something that you want to have in your kitchen where you sit at the table and you linger a little longer, you enjoy conversation, or maybe you like to host and you have brunches, adding a small sofa is such a great way to do it. And again, back to the softening the space, that's also a great way to soften the space. And you can have fun with pattern on that sofa too. So it brings in a whole other layer of interest. So yeah, but just make sure that seat height aligns with your table. This is just one of those subtle things people really feel, even if they don't consciously notice it. So for instance, if your seat height is too low, and it's different than some of the other chairs. So say you have a sofa on one side or a bench on one side, and then you have hard, wood chairs on the other side. Just make sure that seat height is the same. You don't want your guests to feel like they're sitting really, really low. Everyone else is a little bit higher than them and sitting more upright. Like immediately, those subtle feels in a space are noticed subconsciously if they're not consciously aware of why they feel weird or off while they're sitting at your table. So number 4 is to add a lamp. Yes, in the kitchen. This is one of the simplest and most impactful changes. I love seeing a lamp in the kitchen. I think it just adds such a nice aesthetic feeling to the space. It also can add interest if it's an interesting shade or shape. It just creates a moment. I love, love, love lamps in the kitchen. And this is one of the simplest and most impactful changes, because if you imagine walking into your kitchen and turning on the soft glow of a lamp versus your overhead lighting, it just impacts how you greet your day. It's going to keep the feeling kind of chill and nice, but it's also healthier to do as well. If you have LED lighting in the kitchen, ease into your day with more of a warm light. A halogen or an incandescent bulb. It supports your circadian rhythm and it just creates that softer start to your day. So it's a healthier way to ease into your day. Yeah, as readily available as LED lights are and how economical they are, they're not necessarily the best for us health-wise. So when adding a lamp, try, a halogen or an incandescent if you can get your hands on one. Number 5 is to introduce a shelf and a vignette. If you have a wall, use it. Often making use of vertical space, especially in a kitchen, is really important, but it's also an opportunity to add a little style, create that vignette. Yeah, another little moment. So a wood shelf, a stone shelf. I love stone shelves, doing something to elevate it and make it feel a little more luxurious. With a wood shelf, you can do something that's a little more aged and an old feeling if you want to bring in a bit of old world. And then look at your brackets. Brackets are a great way to level up the shelf. So if you're buying a ready-to-go shelf, think about swapping the brackets out with something vintage or something that adds a little more personality to it. And then you want to style the shelf, add a piece of art, a lamp, a few little objects, right? Now that you've created that moment somewhere for your eye to land, you've introduced some personality to the space. And when your eye lands on something beautiful that you've intentionally curated and put together, your perception of the entire room shifts. So utilize that small thing to have a big impact in how you feel in the space. Okay, so now let's move on to the entryway. This space is often underestimated, but it is one of the most psychologically important areas in your home. It greets you when you come home and it sends you off when you leave. So, how it feels matters. If it's cluttered, chaotic, or just uninspired, you carry that with you. If it's organized and intentional, it really can ground you and set you up. So look at the entryway as a threshold. Think of your entryway that, it's that transition point between the outside world and your private space. So what would it feel like if that transition was calm, if that transition was beautiful and organized? That's what we're aiming for. So what you want to start with is simplicity. You want to first remove any clutter, then create a space for everything. Entryways are just one of those hard working zones, especially if you have a family. I know in our house, it's like the constant battle to get the shoes put away and the bags put away and the coats hung up and all of the things. But it really is important. We walk past our entryway constantly throughout the day, and we go through the door when we're leaving and when we're coming home. So how it's set up and how it is functioning really does impact us. And I can feel it right away when everything is out of place and everything is just sort of thrown around as sometimes my kids do. And I think that when all of us, I can see how it affects my kids, right? When they can go and they know that their coat is hung up where it needs to be, where their shoes have been put away on their shelf, and it's clean, it's tidy, and it looks beautiful. I have flowers on the table. It impacts everyone. So I can see how organized they feel and how timely they are. If they're not looking for things, they're saving time. So it really does have a big impact on how we go about our days. So yeah, create a place for everything, your shoes, your keys, your bags, because here's the key. You have to make it look good, because when something looks good, you're more likely to maintain it. So if it's a space that you've set up to be really inviting, to have personality, and to be really organized, then you're going to want to make sure that it stays that way. You're going to feel the effects and you're going to get that visual sense of, I love when I'm in this space. So the design elements that really can make an impact in your entryway is, the first one is to create a visual pause. So this is just like a display moment. Even if you have a really small entryway, you can do this. A table with a tray. So yes, you need some floor space for a small table. You can do a mirror. So a plant, but even if you don't have a lot of floor space, think about the vertical space, right? So a table with a tray, for instance, instead of a table, you could do a shelf or a wall mount little piece of furniture. This creates a moment of intention, right? Where your eyes can land on something that you've added that's beautiful and that's nice to look at. In well-designed homes, there's always somewhere for your eye to land, and it was always done intentionally for that purpose. Okay? So number 2 is to use the vertical interest in small spaces. If your entryway is narrow, you can add a statement light. You can change out your closet doors. So don't just look at your closet doors as this non-detailed thing. You can actually replace your closet doors with something more interesting, or even paint them out to have a contrasting color or a pop of color if you want to have some fun. You can introduce interesting tile or a wall treatment. If you've got tile on your floor, you can swap it out for something like a checkerboard tile or even a pattern tile. And a wall treatment, you can do something like a tapestry even, or just fun art, right? So you draw the eye upward. And number 3 is a floating shelf. And I've mentioned this already, but if you don't have space for a table, do a floating shelf, but not just a generic floating shelf. Do something that feels really special. I talked about this in the kitchen, right? But doing like a stone or a vintage wood and then swapping out the brackets. trying to look for ways to add a little detail that makes it feel really special. This is where you can elevate the everyday and the kind of the coming and goings of this space. You can choose to elevate it and make it something that you want to just pause in a little bit longer, where your eye is drawn up, where your eye is drawn out. Number 4 is to add a rug to define the space. Even if it's small, this just visually separates the entryway from the rest of your home. And that's a really important thing when you're trying to anchor that space and create a pause, right? A pause to remove your shoes and put stuff away, a pause to take a breath before you leave. So adding a rug and defining that space will help. It also will help to give those visual cues to your body to say, you're not going to leave your shoes past this point, or you're not going to throw your coat past that point, that you're going to stop here and put the stuff away and allow it to stay where it's meant to be. Number 5 is flowers. This one matters more than people realize. I know that often we can think, it's just nice to have flowers, fresh, beautiful flowers. And it is, but it does more for us than you might realize. Research shows that even viewing flowers can reduce stress, it can lower blood pressure and improve your mood. So this isn't just decoration, it's actually physiological. So do this to just set the tone when you leave and when you come back. Seeing flowers in an oversized vase is a beautiful way to add that impact in your entryway. Okay, so let's talk about the living room. This is one of those spaces that has the potential to have one of the biggest impacts on your day-to-day life. Because when you really think about it, this is where so much happens. It's where you sit at the end of the day, where you connect with your family, where you decompress, where you might read or watch something, or just have a quiet moment. And because of that, I really believe that this room should be protected a little bit. It should feel intentional, it should feel organized, and it should feel like it's set up to really support you. But I always want to say this with a bit of context, because we are all human. There are going to be days, weeks, even seasons where it just doesn't look like that. Recently, in my household, we got a puppy, and, we had days where our living room felt completely taken over. There were puppy toys everywhere, a bed, a crate. It just felt like I couldn't even keep up. And what I started to notice was how much that affected everything else. It felt harder to relax, harder to focus, even harder to know what the space was meant for in that moment. And it reminded me of something really important. Too many choices, too many functions happening all in one space when there's overlap and just too much going on, it creates overwhelm. We actually need structure in our environments. We need subtle cues that tell us, this is where I sit and relax. This is where I read. This is where I connect. And when everything starts sort of blending together, when the room becomes that catch-all, it creates a kind of background noise that you might not notice consciously, but you absolutely feel. So one of the most important and impactful things that you can do in your living room is to simplify and create a bit of structure. Not rigid rules, but intentional setup. And this is where small design choices really make a big difference. So here are a few things that I come back to again and again. First, anchor the room with a properly sized rug. This is one of those things that seems small, but it really does change everything. If your rug is way too small, the room will always feel a little bit off, like the furniture's floating and disconnected. And when it's the right size, where at least the front legs of your furniture sit on it, it immediately creates cohesion. It really does ground the space and makes everything feel just more settled. Second, you want to layer your lighting. Lighting is one of the fastest ways to shift how a room feels. If everything is coming from one overhead source, especially if it's a cooler bulb, the space can feel flat and a bit harsh. So instead, introduce warmth. Use softer, warmer bulbs and add in a floor lamp or a table lamp. Even just one additional light source can completely change the atmosphere, especially in the evenings. And I've touched on this already, but LED bulbs disrupt our circadian rhythms. So make sure you switch them out, especially in the evening, to more of a halogen or an incandescent bulb. A spectrally optimized bulb is great as well. So look for other ways to not only create that ambiance, but to actually swap the length of light that's being emitted from your light source. This has a really big impact on our circadian rhythms and just gets us ready for evening and promotes good, healthy sleep and all of those things. The third thing is to create a vignette. And I want to emphasize just one is enough. You don't have to go overkill or overthink this. So just choose a surface like your coffee table or a sideboard and style it with a few intentional objects that tell a story, that have meaning. Maybe it's a book, a candle, a ceramic piece, a plant. What this does is it gives your eye a place to land. And when your eye has somewhere to land, the whole room starts to feel more considered and just less scattered. And when you create a vignette, the negative space in between objects should be considered as much as the objects themselves. Look at it as a way of getting creative. You're taking liberty on your aesthetic experience within your space. So use a vignette as a way, just have fun with it. And I always say too, take a picture and look at it, because seeing it from that different medium can actually impact how you switch it up and what you think about it. So look at it from different angles, look at it from a photo, and play around with it. I always say when you're creating vignettes in your home, go shopping in your own home first, collect objects, rearrange some things, and just have some fun. It is such a great opportunity to add your personality and to liven up the space a bit. The fourth thing is just to choose one meaningful piece of art. So, and I say this because it really just to reduce that sense of overwhelm that I think some people can have when they're looking to introduce art into their space. So instead of trying to fill every wall, choose something that actually evokes a feeling, something that draws you in, and place it in a way that is the focal point in the room, so that when you walk into the room or where you're sitting in the room, you're engaging with it, you notice it, and your eye is drawn to it. That one piece can elevate the entire room far more than multiple pieces that don't really connect. So don't overwhelm yourself with the thought of, I have to add in art and all of the walls need to have it. If you just start with choosing one considered piece that you really connect with, that's going to really create that intentionality with the design in your space. And then finally, layer in texture. This is where the warmth comes from. A throw, a cushion, natural materials like linen, wool, or wood. These are all the elements that make a space feel lived in, comfortable, and inviting without adding that clutter and that overwhelm. And all of these things, they're relatively simple, okay? But when they come together, they completely shift how the room feels and how you experience it. And this is just really, I just touched on kind of the surface level for the living room. Because when you start to understand how to bring a living room together more kind of holistically, how layout affects flow, how scale impacts comfort, how lighting and materials and styling all work together, it becomes much easier to create a space that actually supports your life. And I just touched on, some of the things that you can do. Because when you start to understand how to bring a living room together more holistically, how layout affects flow, how the scale impacts comfort, how lighting and materials and styling all work together, it becomes much easier to create a space that actually supports your life. So if you're feeling like your living room isn't quite there yet, or you're not sure how to really pull all of these pieces together in a cohesive way so it feels elevated and it benefits your life, I've created a free living room essentials guide that walks you through it step by step. It's really designed to help you create a space that feels calm, functional, and complete, like designed and elevated without overcomplicating it. So if you want to level up your living room and really, really pull it all together properly, you can download that directly from my website, yourpero.com. So do go grab that because I think that it could really help you if you're kind of in this not sure where to go next. Okay, so next, number 4, we're going to talk about the bedroom, which is your reset space, right? The bedroom is your place of rest. And yet it's often the most neglected, unfortunately. So I want you just to kind of start with an honest edit. If there are piles, just acknowledge them. Don't ignore them. Don't overlook them. Because even if you're not actively thinking about them, you're feeling them. They contribute to mental clutter, restlessness, and just a lack of inspiration. So you want to start with a reset. And I think the bedroom is such an important zone because it really does, if you're going to sleep with a lot of clutter, if it's dusty and just unkept, then that's going to impact how you settle in at night and then how you wake up in the morning. Because when you open your eyes, what's the first thing you see? So pay attention to that. Maybe tonight when you go to bed, make a mental note of in the morning, I'm going to open my eyes and I'm just going to see how I feel. I'm going to take note of what my eyes land on and what I think. Am I waking up feeling agitated already? You don't want to start your day like that. So don't ignore the piles, start with that reset. I would say to look at your drop zones because often in a bedroom, we have these little zones that we just start to pile stuff up on. Your bedside table is a perfect example. Bedside tables often slowly become a stack of books, random objects, and clutter. And over time, it kind of fades into the background. We actually stop noticing these things. Our bodies notice them, we're responding to them, but we're almost like ignoring them. So that's your cue to reset. And then there's some design upgrades that really matter in a bedroom. So I'll run through some of those. The first thing is to update your headboard. This sets the tone. It's amazing what a headboard can do to a space. And often what you gravitate towards, so as you're looking at different headboard styles, that can indicate what kind of style you like for your bedroom. So for instance, if it's tall and tufted, so there's a lot of detail to it, maybe it's a velvet, then that would lend itself more to a traditional style. Whereas if you gravitate more towards low and sleek, then that would be more contemporary. This often reflects your style more than anything else. And always include your partner in these decisions. Start the conversation. I talk about this a lot, how important it is with any design decisions in your home to get others involved. This matters for just shared ownership of this space, giving both people liberty to say how they like it to look and how they want it to feel and what they need. So this comes down to where do they like to put their stuff? Where are they wanting to place their books? Or do they need a tray for, their watch or, whatever it is? But just having that conversation, how is this space impacting each person right now when they wake up in the morning, when they go to bed at night? How are they feeling? And what are their favorite styles and favorite looks? I think this is also important for removing some of the pressure from just one person. Often it's one person that makes the design choices, and that can be pretty weighty sometimes, I think. I've talked to women especially who say, well, I would love for my partner to get involved in these choices, because when I make a choice and then I change something and they come home or they walk into the room and they're like, oh, what's that? They don't like it. It can feel really deflating. It's really important for everyone to get on board and for everyone to be involved in the conversations to make sure that it's kind of a collective decision and that everyone feels good in the spaces that they're using day to day, especially the bedroom, because, it is a place of rest and that's very impactful. The next thing is to update your bedding. Think luxury hotel. I love looking at luxury hotels as inspiration. And I often tell people, when you go to a hotel, what is it that you love about the bed? When you look at pictures of luxury hotels, what is it that really makes it feel special and makes it feel taken care of and well kept? This should feel like a treat every night. You get into your bed that's nicely made and it feels good with your cushions, your bedding. And this can be the weight. This can be that you're making sure you've got your 100% cotton if that's what you love, or your slippers are ready for you beside your bed, or you've got your robe. Everything's there, set, ready to go. Yeah, so just really update your bedding and make your bedding feel special, like it's a moment. And the next thing is to layer your lighting. Look at your lighting in your bedroom as an opportunity to add interest. So things like a statement ceiling light, bedside lamps or sconces, an optional corner light. These are, lighting changes everything. So if you can control the light levels throughout your day and at night, this is really important. You can add dimmers, which is just such an added little bonus. It's very cost effective to add a dimmer switch. So look at ways to do that to control the light levels. The next thing is to add texture through fabric. Tapestries are amazing and they're often underrated. But if you're wanting to add texture to your bedroom, doing a wall tapestry, and you can get creative with this. This doesn't have to be something really historic looking or, really bold. It can be a subtle texture. And so look to do that. They add warmth, they can soften the room, and they provide visual interest without some of the heaviness that some art can do to a bedroom, especially if you want to create something light and airy and relaxing. And I do think too, tapestries, you can get them that they're very tonal and they're textural, right? So it's not so much of a commitment in terms of what art would work in the bedroom. And the next thing is to create a sitting area. Even a small chair in a bedroom works really well, but just be cautious that it doesn't become that dumping ground, because this is really about intentional use and creating those room rules around what is allowed and what's not allowed in the bedroom. So yeah, just create a little moment, a little chair, or if you've got the space, a chaise, just a place that you can sit and relax. If you've got a window, anchor it so that it's facing the window and you can sit and just look out the window and have a few moments to yourself. The next thing is to consider room rules. I just mentioned it, but I really believe so strongly in room rules. So it just reinforces the purpose of the room. Again, going back to the whole puppy thing that I mentioned, is like when we have too many choices and overlapping uses, just creates a sense of chaos in a space. And especially in a bedroom when we're wanting it to be calm, those room rules are really important. So no tech. I mean, we know that looking at your phone at night, or even if it pings in the night and you look at it, try to avoid that, because that immediately impacts how you sleep. So get an alarm clock. Just go old school and just make sure that the tech is really staying out of the bedroom. The next one is to add subtle architectural detail. This is a great room to do this. You can do it with wall trim. Beadboard ceilings also are a great way to do this. And you can actually add like a slight sheen finish to your walls or the ceiling, because this reflects light and creates a soft glow in the bedroom. Adding a slight sheen to the ceiling just adds that level of glow, and the light just bounces around the room really, really nicely. So look at ways that you can add architectural detail. So yeah, wall trim, beadboard ceiling, so some sort of ceiling treatment and then playing with different sheens in the space. So we touched on a lot in today's episode. And what does all of this come down to? It's not about doing everything in your home design-wise. It's about choosing one or two small changes to start in each space that support your habits, improve how things look, and ultimately change how you feel. Because your home is not just where you live, it's something that shapes your energy, your mood, your habits, your lifestyle. And the smallest changes, when done with intention, can have the biggest impact. If you take anything from this episode, let it be this. You don't need to start with a full overhaul to improve your home. You just need to start noticing and adjusting the little things. Create space for better living. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode of Your Home by Design. Thanks so much for listening today. If you found this episode helpful, the best way to support the show is to follow along and share it with someone who'd love it too. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become one of our Better Living backers. It's a small monthly contribution that helps keep the show going. And as a thank you, I'll send you a personal note along with a 15% discount for the Create Space course when it launches. You can find the Support the Show link right in the show notes. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for creating space with me.